Thank you. Thank you again for inviting us to share with you some of the information on bedaquiline. Just a clarification, I'm technically no longer in Janssen. I'm in mother company, Johnson & Johnson. My paycheck now says Johnson & Johnson, doesn't say Johnson anymore. It's a technicality that even I don't understand. But nonetheless, so again, it's our pleasure indeed to share with you the information we have today. I'm not going to use a pointer because I noticed that the pointer only shows on this side, and those people don't get to see the pointer. So I don't want to deprive anyone of a pointer. So to the extent possible, I'll try to speak to the slides directly. So this slide just shows you the timeline of our clinical development activities beginning from the time that bedaquiline entered into human studies. And it summarizes what's been done, the number of phase 1 trials, phase 2 trials that have informed the registrations that we have today, and planned activities around phase 3, the pediatric study, as well as an effort to collect more data in sort of real world settings in the form of a multi-country MDR-TB registry. Vis-a-vis the phase 3 study, we are collaborating with the union, and our phase 3 will be in the form of our collaboration through STREAM stage 2 with ID, who will speak about in due course. Am I pushing the wrong button? There we go. So since bedaquiline has been available, we've had pre-approval programs in the form of a global compassionate use program that was available in countries that have a legal and regulatory framework for this type of activity. And an ATU in France. France has a very specific framework for pre-approval access. It's called the ATU. And also an EAP trial in Russia and in Lithuania. At the time we started, those two countries did not have a legal framework for what we would call compassionate use, so we had to do a clinical trial whose primary objective was access to the drugs. And you can see the numbers of patients that have received drugs in those programs. Of note, we've been receiving safety reports from physicians using bedaquiline, and in the 3 programs, the mortality range has varied from about 3% in France, the ATU, and 6% in the global compassionate use program. As those of you who remember, one of the things that we'd worried about in one of our phase 2 programs, C208 stage 2, is that there was a mortality imbalance disfavoring the arm that contained bedaquiline. And the global compassionate use program has been utilized in various countries to varying degrees. As you can see, in different countries, for one reason or another, the numbers of patients that have accessed bedaquiline in the early access programs is different. You can see South Africa on the far left, and then France. It's interesting that most patients that have received bedaquiline in the early access program in France, in fact, come from Georgia, the Republic of Georgia, not Atlanta. So it's quite interesting in that regard. And you can see the distribution of the other countries up to 6, and then the other 32 countries treated less than 5 patients. So a lot of the reason is sort of capacity on the ground to be able to build up a program and to begin to introduce new drugs. I think that was probably the limiting factor in terms of countries' abilities to be able to put in place a program that had adequate support and adequate monitoring and introduce a new drug to treat patients. Patients are there. The question is, what capacity do we have to implement treatment programs? And our regulatory strategy, excuse me, is to target countries that have high burden of MDR-TB. To date, bedaquiline has been registered in 42 countries, and registration decisions are pending in 17. our registration filings and or approvals represent about 80% of the global burden of MDR-TB. And you can see the map of countries in which either registration is pending and or has been granted. Other updates, I just wanted to let you know that we've since published results of the C209 study. C209 was done to gather additional safety information on bedaquiline, and it enrolled 233 patients with MDR-TB, many of whom had pre-extensively drug-resistant TB and extensively drug-resistant TB, and those results have been published in European Respiratory Journal, as you can see the reference at the bottom. And I've summarized the outcome of that study. On the left are the study definitions, where sputum culture conversion was the primary objective, and you can see that 72% of the patients achieved that in a modified intent to treat analysis. And we also did a WHO-based definitions based on proposed outcomes that were published in 2006. So this is a much more stringent description of cure, where in that publication by Lesserson et al. Identified cure as 5 consecutive negative cultures in the last 12 months of treatment. So overall treatment. So that's the definition that we've used here on the right side when we say WHO definitions. So 61% of patients achieved cure, which means they had at least 5 consecutive negative sputum cultures in the last 12 months of their treatment. And remember, bedaquiline was only given in its first 6 months of treatment of normally 18 to 24 month treatment regimen. And people worry and ask about the resistance, and I noticed that Jeff also discussed a little bit about what they're observing around delamanid. So in the C209 study, in the modified intent to treat analysis, we did look at change in the MIC from baseline of bedaquiline. And we haven't defined a breakpoint yet for bedaquiline because of the paucity of data that we've gathered thus far in a clinical trial. In discussing with the regulators, a decision has been made that we do not yet have enough information to define the breakpoint. But nonetheless, using a traditional way of looking at possible resistance, that is looking at greater than 4-fold increase in the MIC of bedaquiline compared to baseline, we noticed that of the patients for whom we could prove that it was the same organism they had started with through genotyping, 12 patients had greater than 4-fold increase in the MIC of bedaquiline when you looked at a baseline versus a subsequent isolate collected at 24 weeks or later. Some of whom were failing, some of whom in fact did eventually achieve cure, interestingly. Of interest, all these 12 had mutations in the RV0678 gene, so that's the gene that controls the efflux mechanism to which bedaquiline and clofazimine are substrates. So, and I hope you can see that. Yeah, I think you can see it. So the 12 patients are surrounded by that red rectangle. You can see that although some of them had greater than 4-fold increase in the MIC of bedaquiline, some of them did respond favorably. The green that says response, and then the other ones are the outcome of the patients. Some patients that did not have an increase of greater than 4-fold increase in the MIC did fail, and some did respond favorably. So there was not direct mapping from this phenomenon of these mutations, increase of greater than 4-fold in MIC, and treatment response. If you do your math quickly, you can see that both the red and the green circled or surrounded domains have about a 41 to 42% response rates in each. So it's kind of, at this point in time, I don't think we have enough data to say what this really means, but it's something to continue to observe on and try to understand. So we've also looked at some of the resistance emerging in our C208 study. We did look at emerging resistance to the background regimen, to the accompanying drugs. And you can see I've sort of listed in here drugs on the left side, and then number of patients whose isolates acquired resistance during the treatment in the bedaquiline arm versus in the arm with the placebo and background regimen. And you can see the numbers for yourself. I've sort of highlighted a few. Amplification to pre-drug resistant TB, pre-XDR and XDR was seen in 2 patients for XDR and 6 patients in pre-XDR in placebo arm and 0 in the bedaquiline arm. And these amplification of resistance were driven mainly by resistance emerging to fluoroquinolones, in this case to ofloxacin in the placebo arm. This was not seen in the bedaquiline arm. So we thought that's sort of something worth understanding a bit, and then going forward perhaps understanding a little bit more the role of bedaquiline in perhaps preventing the emergence of resistance in the accompanying drugs. One patient did develop that greater than 4-fold increase in bedaquiline in bedaquiline arm that I was referencing for the C209 study. And as you are aware, our access activities include a donation program with which we have our USAID to work. And this is an ongoing activity to allow access in over 110 countries, low-income countries, for the next, I guess, 3 years now. It's a 4-year program. So many countries have indeed accessed bedaquiline through this pathway, and the access is through the GDF, and countries need to have processes in place to be able to provide bedaquiline in a way that it is indeed recommended by the WHO. And this is just a map of which countries are eligible for the donation program. I'm not going to read all of them, it's 110 of them. And bedaquiline in 2015 was shipped to the countries highlighted here, to a total of 6,000 patients. So these are 2015 data. And people continue to use it, and subsequently we will update on the number of shipments that have been effected in this year as well. And I spoke to the multi-country registry, which is an effort to collect data in real-world settings, and we've approached several countries to work with them as they roll out their treatment programs, so that we can collect data under those settings in order to gather more information on the safety of use of bedaquiline under programmatic setting. And so far, the multi-country registry is underway in South Africa, and we're almost there in South Korea. We're also having discussions in India, where we do have a conditional approval. And we're also considering including China, where we do not yet have an approval. We are awaiting a regulatory decision there. We have indeed filed in China. But China would be a good place to include in our multi-country registry if things go the way we hope they will. And selection of countries is based on various factors, and important is just the strength of the treatment programs in the public health sector, and also expressed interest on the countryside. And I'll stop there and remind people that we're all connected by the air we breathe.
Thank you, Chrispin. Any questions for clarification?
Hi, Branya Brigden, MSF Access Campaign. Wondering if you could expand a little bit on your pediatric program, when exactly you think that's going to start and how it's going to de-escalate.
Erica, did you have the same question?
This is Erica Lessem from TAG. I had the same question and another one, which was A5343. We've been asking for drug-drug interaction studies since, I think, the second CPTR meeting in 2011. Thank you.
Hi, so I did allude to the pediatric program in my timeline of clinical development activities. So we have been in a preparatory phase of our clinical study in pediatrics, and we've met some operational challenges of getting the study done. We have sites in preparation in South Africa and in Russia, and for varying reasons, we have not been able to start the studies in these two countries. In South Africa, it's mostly an infrastructure issue at the site at which we would like to do the study. So we are undertaking certain activities to make sure certain infrastructure is in place. This is physical infrastructure. And working with the local, the investigator and the local authorities there, we're working to make sure that things get off the ground as quickly as possible. In Russia, it has to do with the protocol itself in terms of the comments we received from those that would approve the study. We got some pushback on certain issues, including the inclusion of children of a certain age. So we've had to make an amendment to the protocol in order to adhere to this pushback. And there were also issues about why we were using drugs in the background regimen that were not approved for the treatment of TB. We found that odd, that would get that kind of pushback. So we're not talking about the bedaquiline in this case, we're talking about the background regimen drugs. So, these challenges had to be addressed in the protocol, and both these issues have delayed the start of our pediatric program. But we're working really hard to get this done. In addition to that, we're exploring a few more countries to see if we can sort of mitigate the impact that the delay might cause in terms of duration of enrollment. So we're working on adding countries to our pediatric program so that we could have more sites enrolling once the study gets off the ground. Vis-a-vis A5343, the delaminate bedaquiline drug-drug interaction study sponsored by DAIDS. One of the things that have yet to happen is the signing of a clinical trial agreement between Janssen and DAIDS. There has been sort of like a back and forth between contracting entities in both organizations, and for various reasons they couldn't agree what should be removed, what should remain in the contract. And tomorrow I think they're having a conversation, hopefully that will forever finalize the document. So I'm hoping that tomorrow's call will finally resolve the issues. There are sort of certain issues with our big company and a big entity like the US government where one does not want to budge on certain issues. And these things can only be resolved when you talk rather than when you email each other. So I think the decision to have a call whereby all these issues would be addressed one by one and come to a resolution and then finalize this. I know this should have happened a long time ago, but sometimes things work this way, and it's unfortunate that the study hasn't started. I think, if this were the last thing and the only thing standing in the way, I would, in that regard, take responsibility that I will talk to my colleagues to make sure that this thing actually gets done and we get started already. So yes, Erica did point out that the conversation around this kind of study started a long time ago. My first time at CPTR, and I've been coming to CPTR for a long time.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Sorry that I was so verbose in responding to those, but I think these are important issues that need to be addressed and responded to. Thank you.
Yes, great.